All the mental content represents attachments. And underneath all these attachments, there is one connectivity. That is, all these attachments are connected to the ego. Because ego is thought of or considered to be as our identification. Whenever we have to say I or I am or mine, the important thing there is I. So we have to use that as the only identification. In the present state of knowledge, at this level, our identity is connected with ego. So that is considered to be the source of our identification and the source of our survival and the source of our happiness. That is why we give so much of importance to this ego, because it is considered to be the source of survival, source of happiness and one's own identification. But in truth, according to the scripture, according to the scriptural knowledge, our true source of identification is the Atma. The real source of happiness is the Atma. The real source of survival is the Atma. So whatever actually is connected with the Atman, because of our ignorance, we have attributed all those things to the ego and gave it so much of prominence that all the mental content is linked with the ego, and underlying this mental content there are all attachments. Because of this ignorance, what happened in us, and also because of this mutual superimposition of Atma in the Anatma and Anatma in the Atma, certain false belief has settled in us. It has become very strong. That false belief is there is an imaginary inner knower. There is an inner knower. Actual knower we don't know, because we are not yet conscious of it. We are not aware of it. But we think that there is an inner knower, and that is ego only. And there is an inner doer of deeds, actor of acts, and thinker of thoughts. The perceiver, feeler, and thinker is believed to be the actual doer of deeds, actor of acts, and thinker of thoughts. And this is a belief that has settled in us because of ignorance and as well as mutual superimposition. And because of this, we get entangled with the ego and find it very difficult to come out of it. And all the thoughts that arise out of the ego are all leading us into attachments or aversions. Either they go into likes or they get into dislikes. Ego will do only that. Either it gets extremely attached or it gets extremely averse. Actually, each thought arises according to certain research in consciousness or conscious research that is done by great masters. Each thought arises out of nothingness. Each thought arises out of that portion of the mind, or that field of the mind, which is basically silent. Thoughts arise like that. When we see in an ocean, sometimes the fishes jump out of the ocean. When a fish jumps out, the fish is jumping out of the ocean. From the ocean, a fish jumps out. And afterwards another fish. Like duck, whales also, dolphins also. If we think that one fish is connected to another fish, that is our imagination. Another fish is jumping because this fish is jumping out. That is our imaginative connectivity. But actually each fish jumps out of the ocean. Like that, each thought comes out of that silent state of the mind. And it is not actually the preceding thought which creates this forthcoming thought. It comes out of the mind. And because of this research, it is discovered that 99% of the mind is basically silent. And all this agitation, confusion, identification, attachment, so on and so forth, the life stories, all these things are connected with the 1% of the mind. So, the ego is hypnotized by that 1% of the mind and identifies with it as me. So that 1% of the mind which is full of turbulence and agitation and activity, continuously bringing forth with the activity, ego identifies with that and then thinks it is I. Like in the ocean, the topmost portion is the waves. When compared to the total ocean, waves form only a very small percentage of the total ocean. It is only in the topmost layer. Like that, the 1% of the mind, which is full of activity. And we don't recognize the other bigger, larger portion of the mind which is not involved in the activity and which is always there in silence. So if we get out of the identification with this one portion of that mind and become aware of that other portion of the mind, at least that will give us infused silence in our day-to-day living or activities. And it is also said that whenever these thoughts arise, and when these thoughts that arise are labeled because of this identification as mine, as long as we don't label these thoughts as mine, they don't bother us. They don't have any significant value or worth. But the moment we label these thoughts as mine, whether it is real or not real, whether it is connected with truth or untruth, whether it is connected with the facts or there are no actual facts, but the moment we label this thought as mine, then suddenly it gets magically imbued with the presumptive omniscience. Meaning what? It becomes imbued with the truth. Suppose we start thinking that it is supposed to be true, it is believed to be true, assumed to be true. Suppose believed, assumed to be true, till the contrary is true. So immediately we will think it is true. If the thoughts are labeled as mine, mine means it is true. If it is coming from me, if it is an opinion, if it is a thought, if it is a remark, whatever it is, if it is coming out of me, it is mine, it is true. Unless and until somebody disproves it through logic and through various other means by exposing us to the truth. Till then we start thinking it is true because it is connected with mind. Mind is true. In order to get out of this entanglement, we need to disown these thoughts, not mind. So when we say they are not mind, then they will lose that validity, that sovereignty, that power over us. Actually, these thoughts, ideas and concepts are of practical use or pragmatic use mainly and only in the worldly way of living, in the worldliness. So many kinds of thoughts and ideas and concepts, various kinds of thinking patterns, all are of pragmatic use or practical use only in the worldliness. With the true understanding, when this worldliness is relinquished, all these thoughts, ideas and concepts will become excess baggage. Nowadays, because of the restrictions of carrying baggage in the weight, now little bit of excess baggage means so much of payment again. So people are very conscious of excess baggage. Here also, those who have understood that worldliness is not the only way of living life, there is the substratum for this worldliness. The source of all that which we expect from the worldliness is actually not the world, not the ego, but the self. And for such people, all these things become excessive baggage and of no value at all. And such people get out of that entanglement with these mechanical thinking patterns. Otherwise, they are identified with, I did this, I thought that, I decided this, I experienced that. So, this thinking pattern continues. But in truth, the very one who says, I did this, I decided that, I experienced that, the truth of that one is that itself is a product of mind. That ahankara, that ego is not a reality. It itself is an appearance. It is mithya. It is there only because of ignorance. So when that itself is false, if it is untrue, then anything that is connected with it, I did that. If that I itself is not real, if that I itself is a dependent reality, if that I itself is not an element of truth, if that I itself is based on falsity, and anything else connected with that, how can it be real? It is not real from the real standpoint or absolute standpoint or standpoint of the scriptures, scriptural knowledge. It is real only because they are ignorant. So because of that, it is said by some of the masters that there is no doer only. There is no thinker. There is no actor. But that is said, people will get surprised. Why they are saying like that? There is no doer, there is no thinker, there is no actor. It is said only because the highest truth is being said there. Step by step, if we start understanding, then finally we come to the conclusion that this ego itself is a false. It is a false thing. It is not real. The reality is the one who is illuminating the ego, is behind the ego, substratum of the ego, the consciousness which is there, the Pratyagatma which is there, that is the reality. And this is false. So whatever is false, anything that is connected with that, which which is false has to be false. That is why sometimes some masters or some rishis also, for that matter, say a different statement, that there is no doer. In the morning, after the homa, one of the devotees came and then they were talking something about the Ramaraya, where the Kaikeyi repents for whatever she has done. That because of the attachment with Bharata, she did all that. But there, in Ramaraya, according to the devotee, it is said by Sri Rama that you have not done anything. It is only I who is behind all these doings. Suddenly this statement is made in Ramaraya, and then people will get confused. Then what about the individual karma? What about the individual responsibility of doing everything? But why it is said, the highest truth is said, that the actual doer is the creative power of the God Maya. That plays all this game through all its own products, its own byproducts. Its own byproduct is the ego, Antakarana. That Antakarana, one of the portion of that Antakarana is I. And that I is actually the byproduct of what? Maya. Maya is the creative power of whom God. So indirectly God is telling, I am only the doer. That means what? The repentance, the guilt, the feeling of responsibility that I am the doer, now I am suffering because of that. All is to remove. That is the love of the God. Why God says like that. That is why some masters also say like that. There is no doer, go. One of the masters says, whenever you say that I did this, I did that, I decided this, I decided that, I thought that, I experienced this, then the master says all these things are deciding themselves and doing themselves all by themselves. All these things are deciding themselves, doing themselves, all by themselves. Then where am I? You are not required. The ego cannot stand that. How can it be possible? If I am not there, the whole world will collapse. But the truth is, if you are there, the world will collapse. That is the point. If I am there, then only the world will collapse. The world is disturbed only because of this I. That is why the fact is that you are not required. There is no need for this I. Do you think for the God this is required? God is beyond Maya. For that consciousness there is no requirement of Maya and the products of Maya. He is all by himself, in himself, in the highest state of bliss and consciousness. So, in order to give a jolt to this ego, to get it out of that misnomer that it alone is responsible for everything, certain statements are made by some great masters and rishis in their own works. Because this ego thinks it alone is responsible for everything. Without this ego, nothing will work. From its level, that may look correct. That is why it goes on thinking. I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to take up this, I have to take up that, without me, how will this work? And there is one more fear for this ego. Why? If it is not constantly thinking, it has a fear that it will get bored. And then it also has got a fear that it will cease to exist. If I don't think, I may not exist. If I don't think, I will get bored. That is why people, whenever they sit for a while, where there is nothing to vigorously think and identify and get involved and get engrossed, they will feel bored. Bored means what? Not being amused by interesting thoughts. That is what it is. When I am not being amused by interesting thoughts, I feel bored. So the ego thinks, if it doesn't think, it will be bored. And then it also thinks it will cease to exist. That is why this ego, whenever somebody does certain sadhanas, spiritual practices, if there is lot of silence that descends or that manifests from within, it gets frightened. Even in the states of meditation, it gets frightened. In deep contemplations, it gets frightened. What will happen? That is the fear of the ego, that if it doesn't think, it may not survive. But the truth is, we will survive for eternity if we let go of that fear of the ego and allow it to die. That is why our focus should be on the substratum out of which or from which these thoughts arise. Not on the thought, and not on the imaginary thinker of the thought, and not in the content of the thought. The whole attention should not be in the content of the thought, imaginary thinker of the thought, and the thought itself, but it should be on the focus should be on the substratum, on the substrate out of which this thinkingness arises. Because of too much of involvement in this thinkingness and excessive pride that we have in this thinkingness, certain structures got formed. Yesterday we have seen the mentally formed structures, mentally programmed structures or erroneous arbitrary presumptions. So these got formed in ourselves. And because of this, dualities are there, everything is divided. The dualities are manifested. And if these things are surrendered to the divinity or to the God, because of these dualities, because of these mentally programmed structures or erroneous arbitrary presumptions, the ego survives and thrives. Because the ego is made up of all these things. Once these are surrendered, mentally programmed structures are surrendered. Once they are surrendered and the resultant dualities are surrendered, then the ego loses its grip and then slowly it fades away. Just as because of the powerfully blowing wind, all the clouds that have accumulated there till then are taken away by the wind, and then what remains then is only the shining sun. Once the clouds are taken away, the sun starts shining splendidly in its full brilliance. So similarly, all these clouds that are connected with this ego, mentally programmed structures, all these things, when they are surrendered and the residual dualities or resultant dualities which are there, they are surrendered, then what remains is the ever shining Pratyagatma, which is not different from the Supreme Paramatma. So it is for this purpose we need to divert our attention, draw our attention towards that which is the substratum. In his beautiful work, Vedanta Nishchaya, Ramaraya Kavi says, Tadviktam cha nidvaita, Tadviktam cha nidvaita, Swarupam Pratyagatma, Swarupam Pratyagatma, Chidanandamayam Satyam, Chidanandamayam Satyam, Bhumarupam Sumangalam, Bhumarupam Sumangalam. Sri Ramaraya Kavi says, the real nature of the innermost self, which is called as Pratyagatma, is entirely different from all other structures that are there in the internal organ. The mind, intellect, memory, ego, and its contents and their functions and all, whatever they are there, the real nature of the Pratyagatma is totally different, is entirely different. It has no connection whatsoever, no relationship whatsoever with the Antahakarana, with the happiness and the misery that is experienced by the Antahakarana, internal organ. No relationship whatsoever, no connection whatsoever. Meaning what? It will not at all be affected by the happiness or misery or any modifications that happen in the internal organ. Absolutely there is no connection. That's what Ramaraya says. But that has to be driven into our mind. That this Pratyagatma. Why? Normally we think for happiness, we need ego. We need that internal organ. Without that we cannot experience. Without that we cannot have. For whatever we want, we need that. So ego becomes very prominent, and ego's notions become very prominent, the mental thoughts become very prominent. They begin to appear to be totally real. So we get identified and we see no way out of them, and that is the only way we live in this world. Thinking that whatever comes to my mind that is real, and that is valid, that is true. So I am influenced by that. So I undergo that experience, and then that becomes repetitive, and I continue living like it. That is going to break that ignorant connection, foolish attachment. Ramaraya Kavi says, the Pratyagatma has no connection whatsoever with the internal organ or the happiness and the misery. And further he says, it has no duality in itself. Nirdvaita. It is Nirdvaita. No duality in itself. Meaning what? Whatever things we experience, honor, dishonor, success, failure, profit, loss, all such things, joy and sorrow, the duality is not there in Pratyagatma. Whatever we are experiencing as real at the level of our ego and mind, that is not there in the Pratyagatma. And somebody may think, so what? If it is not there in the Pratyagatma, what is benefit to me actually if it is not there? And then it is said, Pratyagatma alone is of the form of Brahman, and that Pratyagatma alone is real. That is important. This ego is false, mind is false, Antakarana false, all the notions are false. What is real is only Pratyagatma. Whatever you are thinking of yourself as I, that ego is not real. And it always undergoes the effects of duality, birth and death also. It is always involved in duality. Pratyagatma, there is neither birth nor death. It witnesses both birth and death. There is nothing in it. There is no duality in it. Ego takes birth, ego dies every time. Meaning what? Ego experiences death, ego experiences birth. And it goes from body to body. And that Chidavasa, Jiva, or Jnanakara, whatever we think it to be. This Pratyagatma, it has not got any duality in itself, and it alone is real. And it is the most auspicious. Sumangala, most auspicious. Not only Mangala. Because there is no death in it. Because there is no change in it. Because there is no modification in it. Because it is not affected by time. Because it is not divided. Whatever is divided, whatever has got change in it, whatever has got the possibility of destruction, whatever has got the possibility of misery, what Mangala it is? What auspicious it is? So temporarily it is auspicious. After that it becomes inauspicious only. The most auspicious thing, where there is no trace of misery, there is no trace of anything else other than the auspiciousness, is Brahman. That is Pratyagatma. And it is not only auspicious, it is Bhumarupam. It is very beautiful. It is the source of all beauty. It is the most beautiful thing. So all the beauty has started from there only. And it is not only real, not only auspicious, not only beautiful, but it is anandamaya, blissful. That is why we have to know about it. Otherwise, we think the ego alone is the source of happiness, source of pleasure, source of survival, and main source of identification. All that has to be left. Meaning what? We should know something is more real than that. And that is the source of all ananda, blissfulness. And it is not unconscious like the ego. In deep sleep it is unconscious, it is ignorant. But here it is Chidmayam. It is full of consciousness. So, Chidanandamayam Satyam Bhuma Rupam Sumangalam. This one statement tells about the truth of the Pratyagatma. Why we have to be ego? The ego is not actually Chidmayam. It is Jada. It has not got any consciousness. Only because the consciousness has extended its power there or its reflection there, then only it becomes alive. And it is not blissful. It is of the form of misery only. It is not real. It is unreal. It is not beautiful. It is the most ugliest thing. It is not auspicious. It is inauspicious. So what is opposite to this ego? Chidanandamayam Satyam Bhuma Rupam Sumangalam. So that way, if we start thinking that this Pratyagatma which is there inside, the innermost self, if this is real, and then the ego is only dependent upon it, then if we shift that identification or the focus of our attention from the ego onto the Pratyagatma, we slowly come out of all this misery and suffering and then the duality, so on and so forth. This also is a way to get out of that mutual superimposition. What Atma is thought of as Anatma, Anatma is thought of as Atma. So this is the beautiful way to get out of it. The girlfriend and boyfriend were talking to each other. The girlfriend said, I will share all your worries after marriage. I will share all your worries. But the boyfriend said, but I don't have any worries. And she said, I am talking about after marriage. You will get it. Right now he has no worries. Like that, Pratyagatma left to itself has no worry. When the power of the Pratyagatma goes and then enlivens the Anatma, then the Anatma starts superimposing itself on the Atma, pretending to be the real knower, real doer, begins. Then we need somebody to share. There was one interview which was being conducted, and the candidate was being interviewed by the interviewing officer, and he saw all the credentials and said, you are all good credentials, good experience, good knowledge, but I can't give you this job because you are not married. This candidate was surprised. Hey, why can't I work for you just because I am a bachelor? Why can't I do this job to me? And he said, you don't know. Please tell me why I don't know. Tell me, what is the advantage which a married man has got? He said, the one who works under me, if he is a married man, even when I shout at him, he will not mind it. Because he is used to it. He will not mind it. If I shout at a bachelor, he will react. And he will start thinking inside of quitting the job or fighting against me or whatever it is. Married man. Anyway, it is there at home, anyway, it is there. He is used to it, so he will take it light. He will not mind it. Suppose this ego is married to this spiritual knowledge, then slowly it will not mind all the dualities and all the impacts of the world, and slowly it will get identified with Once a wife reacted to the husband because he is coming late every day, in spite of she telling him, he is continuing to come late. So suddenly one day she declared, if tomorrow you come late at midnight, I will marry somebody else. Ultimate chakka. If you come tomorrow at midnight again, I will marry somebody else. And the husband says, if that is so, please marry our next door neighbor, Kumar. She is shocked. Why Kumar? Because I want to teach him a lesson. If the lessons are not learned by being conscious to the situations that are provided by the God, then we have to learn those lessons in a very hard way. And sometimes the lessons that are taught to us in satsang will certainly help us to avoid the hard way of learning these lessons. So this also is a nice facility. So then, now we will get back into Sidhantha Bindu and Sidhantha Sindhu. The Pramata, who is called as the Jiva, has got many vikaras. And this Pramata is a Parinami, meaning full of change. So this Pramata or Jiva, who has got modifications and is full of change, can never be a Drashta. He can only be a Drishyam. He can never be a seer, he can only be a seen. And that which is seen is bound to perish. He is full of change. So, it is said, and somebody, like in discussion there are certain objections, and somebody raised an objection stating that this Pramata or Jiva, according to one's thought in philosophy, has no form. Suppose if we accept in our discussion that Pramata has no form, then how can there be change? How can there be modification? And then Ramaraya Kavi presents in Sidhantha Sindhu. Not yet ripe mango or a raw mango has got green color in it. The color actually has no form. It changes into yellow color. The green, after it is ripe, it changes into yellow. And another example is air. By itself, with our perception, we don't see any form for the air, But still, the cyclonic winds get to gather certain forms and blow away so many things which are also having forms. So, even if there is no form, according to your argument, still Pramata will have change. And one more fact to understand that Pramata has got forms is, sometimes he is happy, sometimes he is unhappy. There are changes in the Jiva. Happiness is there, unhappiness is there. And this happiness and unhappiness are forms in the mind. Thought forms, vrittis in the mind. So these forms are there. Even though we say that the Jiva has not got any form as far as our argument in the discussion is concerned, still these thoughts have forms and the changes are there, and at one moment or another moment there is happiness and there is unhappiness. So it is said, the happiness, misery, doership, enjoyership, all these things, kartrutva, bhoktrutva, sukha and dukkha, all are dharmas of antakarana. So that antakarana is pramata, and that pramata, antakarana alone is the doer, and that alone is the enjoyer, and that alone is the parinami, and that is the drushya. And where all this is happening, that which supports all this to happen, that which is the substratum for all this, is Atma, and that is Drashta. Meaning Atma is of the beyond. It is not a karta, it is not a bhokta, it is not sukhi, it is not dukhi, and all these things, the kartatva, bhoktritva alone binds us to the karmas. The sukha, dukkha alone is affecting us a lot because of the impact of the experiences, and in reality, I am not belonging to all these things. This is only jiva, and what is the reality? The reality is not jiva. The jiva, as vacharya is concerned, as far as vacharya is concerned, the jiva is chidavasa, the jiva is a transmigratory entity, but as far as the laksharya is concerned, the reality is concerned, the jiva is nothing but pratyagatma, nothing but atma. The happiness and misery are antakarana dharmas, and they do not belong to atma. And antakarana actually is merged in chaitanya. That is why it has got the capacity to experience these dharmas of sukha and dukkha. Because Pratyagatma has sent its power into this antakarana. Because of that validity, because of that power, because of that consciousness, because of that reflection, whichever matter we understand, because of that only, this antakarana also has got the capacity to experience this happiness and misery. And Ramaraya further goes to analyze that anubhava is of two kinds. One is antakarana vritti jnana, second one is chaitanya matra. One anubhava experience is through antakarana vritti, through the thought that is formed in the mind. Then only they come to experience it. Another one is pure of the form of the consciousness. That's all. Chaitanya matra. And he says, when we say this is a pot, so this is a mind. This thought is formed in the antakarana, the image also is formed in antakarana, it becomes a vritti in antakarana, then only we can gain experience. That vritti itself is a vikara, and that is a modification, and then through that only we gain experience. But only vritti is there. Pure thought as it is, without any other associated entanglements or superimpositions to it. Only vritti is there, without any minus attached to it, and that will not do any harm. If there is a minus that is associated with that vritti, if there is abhimana, I am thinking, it is my experience or my thought or my object, then that will bind us. So that mamakara plus vritti jnana is equal to bhogam according to Ramaraya, or experience. That experience means vritti jnana plus mamakara. Mamakara has to be there, then experience arises. If there is no mamakara, mere vritti jnana, you are just having conscious awareness of that thought. It will not create any experience. You are just aware of it, that's all. That is why even in initial stages, if we at least mechanically say I am only aware of the thought, I am awareness who is aware of the thought, and keep on saying that, then there will be no other experience except that awareness there. And Chaitanya Rupa Jnana, in the Chaitanya Rupa Jnana, how is that experienced? In that highest state, it is only pure consciousness where there is no experiencer experiencing the experienced. There is no triputi. That is called as Chaitanya Matra Jnana. No experiencer experiencing the experienced. This triputi is not there. This triputi is impossible. Then it is said to be the Kevala Anubhava of the Atman. Atmanubhava, Atma Sakshatkara, or whatever we call, it is Kevala. Only for a brief fraction of a second, that experiencer is there, and then it merges into that pure consciousness, and thereafter just pure conscious awareness of itself as consciousness will be there. No vritti jnana rupa anubhava, kevala anubhava, chaitanya rupa jnana. So, in that kevala anubhava is that absolute blissfulness, absolute immortality and consciousness. Ever present reality, ever conscious, ever blissful. So, whatever we call as experience of the Pramata is only Vrittarupa Jnana, it is all not actually very important. We can let go of these things for the sake of gaining that Kevala Anubhava as conscious awareness. That conscious awareness manifests as the witness, witnessing all these things. So that alone is the Pratyagatma, that alone is the Drashta. That Drashta is Ekam, that Ekam is Advitiya. That is our Swarupa. We are Drashta, we are witness, we are Ekam, we are Advitiyam. That is our Swarupa. That is why it is called as Atma is witness. And even when it is extended to much more higher level, that witness functions only as long as there is something to be witnessed. As long as we give validity to the world, validity to the inner world, validity to the outer world, still as long as there is something to be aware of, witness of, this witnessing function remains. Because the consciousness alone manifests as witness. Observer witness or observing witness. When there is nothing to be witnessed, when we have refuted everything and then we have said that the world is not at all appearing, it is only an appearance, it's a trash. What is there even when the world appears is only consciousness. Because of the deep-rooted conviction and through contemplation and meditation, getting into that state of higher purity, then there is nothing to be witnessed because there is nothing else other than the witness to be witnessed, and all that falls away. When all that falls away, even this very function to be a witness also is not required anymore. The witness also is withdrawn into that consciousness. It is simply conscious awareness, aware of itself, conscious of itself as consciousness. Nothing else other than to witness. That is where Ramaraya says, even this state of witness also is still connected with one way or other, connected with the presence of avidya or products of avidya. Because that avidya products are there, you are witnessing. In the highest absolute level of Atma Tattva, even this witness also is not there. That is why it says even the Sakshitva also is connected with avidya. But to get out of this, we need to understand that there is a witness. But afterward, when there is nothing to be witnessed, what to witness, who will witness? But even then, for us to get out of this ego, we have to take hold of that witness who actually is aware, who is conscious, who is manifested only for the purpose of witnessing, so that Sakshi alone is real. Till we go beyond that and get established absolutely in that consciousness, where the Sakshi also is unfolded back into it. He is taken back into it and folded back into it. So then, this Anubhava Rupam, Dharma Rahitam, Ekam, Kutastham is that Sakshi and that is the Paramatma. There are words in the Sidhantha Bindu. Madhusudana Saraswati says, mind is pure like a mirror. Because of its purity, like a mirror, it can receive the reflection of the consciousness, that Brahman, Atman's reflection, or it can become identified with the pure consciousness. Because that mind is clean, and because of superimposition on pure consciousness, mind can get superimposed on it. In either case, it appears to have consciousness and can therefore be substratum of knowledge. The question was, can the mind gain knowledge? The answer is yes, the mind can gain knowledge because it has got a touch of consciousness in it. It is a touch of consciousness. And it is also said here that, taking the example of the space cannot be grasped by senses. Actually, the space cannot be grasped by the senses. It is only revealed by the witnessing consciousness, the Sakshi. The witnessing consciousness alone reveals the space. We can see clouds in the space. We can see light in the space. To see the clouds and light, we need the eye. We need the indriya. But to experience the space, actually, what is required is only consciousness, that witness, because that alone reveals. When that space is reflected in water, which is only knee deep, the space is very deep, the sky is very deep, we can't find the limit of the whole, it goes on. But that sky, when it is reflected in the knee-deep water, that sky will not be as deep as it is in the knee-deep water. The water is only knee-deep, but the sky is reflected. But in that reflection, eye sees the clouds and the light in the reflection also. But the space actually is understood, is grasped, is experienced, or is revealed, is made known only by the witnessing consciousness. So, if the space itself is understood to be revealed by the witnessing consciousness and not by the indriyas, what to say about that God or truth who manifested the space and who is subtler than the space? उनका क्या बोलना? How can indriyas reveal that? So, actual revelation happens only through that witnessing consciousness. The witnessing consciousness reveals that ultimate reality, and afterwards that, because there is nothing else, it also merges into it. What remains there is only that pure truth. And in order to make us understand that the self gets reflected in the mind, in the intellect, and then there is the presence of that abhasa in the mind and intellect, certain authoritative statements are taken here by Madhusudana Saraswati in Sidhantha Bindu. Rupam 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 Prati Rupo Bhavuva Tadasya Rupam it is said, Rupam Rupam Pratarupo Bhavuva Tadasya Rupam Pratyagatma. He, meaning the Brahman, assumed the likeness of each form. Who assumed the likeness of each form? He alone, Brahman alone, has assumed the likeness of each form. And that form of his was for revealing himself. In order to reveal himself, he assumed the likeness of each form. If we see the form and go deep into it, we will finally come to the pure consciousness only. If we set aside the Nama and the Rupa, if we go deep into the Asti, Bhati and Kriya, we will come to see the one-on-one encounter with the presence of that consciousness. Eka eva hi bhutatma bhute bhute vyavasthitah ekadha bahudha chaiva drushyate jalachandravat. From the Brahma Bindu Upanishad, Madhusudana Saraswati takes this authoritative statement. The one and only Supreme Being dwells in each being. Who dwells in all of us? The one and the only. Many times in these movie shows and awards, movie shows, they say to every great actor, the one and the only. The one and the only. They borrowed it from here only. The one and the only. Next time when you see the one and the only great actor, you think the one and the only one. He can be the only one and the only one. One and the only. Eka eva hi bhutatma bhute bhute vyavasthitah. The one and the only Supreme Being dwells in each being. Ekada bahudha chaiva drushyate jalasandravata. And the same being, he alone, he appears as one and also as many. He appears as one, he appears as many. How Jalachandravata, like the moon getting reflected in water. Many sources of water, it appears as many. And one, it is one. And in one source of water, it is one. And you look at the sky, it is one. But many, it appears as many. Because the reflecting media are there. Similarly, one self which is the one and the only one in all the beings from the Pratyagatma level, appears as many from the Jiva. As Jivas are many, minds, intellect, memories are many, the distinctive characteristic features are many, yes, many reflections, Chidabhasas, Jivas. Oh, but the underlying reality is only one in all these beings, Pratyagatma. The same one from the Brahma Bindu Upanishad. Maya Abhasena Jiva Ishau Karoti Jiveshau Karoti Nrsimhottara Tapani Upanishad. Maya creates Jiva. Maya Abhasena Jiva Ishau Karoti. Maya creates Jiva and Ishvara by reflection of Brahman in itself. Brahman getting reflected in itself, Maya creates Ishvara and as well as Jiva. And then Satesha Iha Pravishta. Here, whatever is here, that is there, whatever is here, who has entered here? Saha Esha Iha Pravishtaha from the Brahman Upanishad. He alone has entered here meaning in this Anatma, in this internal organ, in this body, mind and soul. Who entered? He alone entered. There is nobody else who entered. Nobody else who is the opposition party to Bhagavan entering. So that we can say that Bhagavan can say, I am not doing anything, opposition party doing nothing. It's not like that. Not that divinity is claiming that it is not doing anything, only that devil is doing something. Not like that. He alone has entered in all these things. And from the Taittiriya Upanishad, Tat Srushva Tadevan Pravishad. Having created it, he entered that itself. Meaning, here he has entered into it after creating it in the form of a reflection. And Madhusudana Saraswati goes to the extent of citing from the Brahma Sutra, Abhasa Evacha. Individual self is certainly a reflection of the Supreme Self. Brahma Sutra, Upanishads, the authority is being cited there. Who is the individual self? It is only a reflection of the Supreme Self. And another thing is cited again by Madhusudana Saraswati from the Brahma Sutra, Ata Evacha Upama Suryakalivat. Therefore, there is a comparison in the Brahma Sutras, Bhashya of Adi Shankara also, on the Brahma Sutra Bhashya, the reference also see, therefore, the comparison with the sun's reflection, etc., are also authority for this. Sun getting reflected in various pools of water. That is how it is cited there also. So, this is an accepted thing that the Brahman alone has reflected, got reflected in the Antakarana, and he alone functions as the Jiva. And alone is Dasa is nothing but reflection of Brahman, all these references. And Madhusudana Saraswati also takes us into one more thing which is connected with this. Somebody says Abhasa means only reflection, and certain set of philosophers say Abhasa means semblance. So, Tasya Pratibimbasya Satyatvam Eva iti Pratibimbavadinaha Mithyatvam Eva iti Abhasavadinaha Rupe Rupe Tu the adherents of reflection theory, who are called as authors of Vivarana and Sankshepa Sharirikam, and their followers, hold the view that reflection is real. Reflection, the meaning they give is the reflection. And the adherents of semblance theory, like Shankaracharya and his followers, hold that it is mithya. It cannot be described either as real or as unreal, like the snake on the road. From the absolute standpoint, it is unreal. From the transactional standpoint, it looks real. Experiential standpoint, empirical standpoint. So, it cannot be said as real or unreal. But, even though there is difference in this saying that Paramatma is reflection, that reflection is real, and Paramatma is only semblance, that semblance we cannot say it is real or unreal. So, but both of them agree on one thing, that there is no dispute about the existence of reflection itself. There is existence of reflection. Therefore, it is established that the mind becomes a knower because of the reflection of the self in it and because of the identification with the self. It is only because of that identification with the self and because of the reflection of the Atma in it, the mind can know things. The mind cannot know unless and until that reflection is there in the mind, or mind itself is superimposed upon the consciousness. It cannot know. The consciousness element has to touch it. There should be some touch of consciousness in the mind, then only it can function. Mind means ego also. Meaning what? Whenever we say I, that I can function only if there is consciousness touching it. Otherwise it cannot function. So what is reality? The reality is the consciousness and not this I, which we are thinking that this is Jiva, I am the doer, I am the enjoyer, I am the experiencer of happiness and misery, and I am taking birth and I am dying, I am experiencing the happiness because of union and misery, sadness because of separation. All this is only at the Jiva level. But this is not the ultimate reality. The reality is only at the Pratyagatma level or the Atma level. Avidya creates Anatma, and such an Anatma is superimposed by Avidya on Atma. Please follow this. Very nice explanation by Ramaraya in Sidhantha Sindhu. Avidya creates Anatma, and this Avidya alone superimposes Anatma on Atma, and there afterwards mutual superimposition between Atma and Anatma happens due to Anatma only. Because of Anatma, which is superimposed on Atma by Avidya, after creating it, mutual superimposition happens because of Anatma only. So, the Antakarana, which is Anatma, even though it is inert, even though it is Jada, due to the reflection of Chit or consciousness in it, it can do the superimposition. It does the superimposition also, it is only superimposing itself on it, not because it is powerful, not because it can do it by itself, it is only because of the touch of the consciousness, the mind can, Antakarana can superimpose itself upon the Atma. So it superimposes itself. So, it is said here, because of that, we get these thoughts that are there, I am a man, I am a woman, and I am a doer, and I am an experiencer, all these thoughts are there. And then there is an analysis, whether this is a real knowledge or a memory or a delusion. So, the analysis here is, when I say I am a doer, I am an enjoyer, I am a man or a woman, based on the Shruti, meaning the scripture, it is refuted to be the real knowledge. Only from the standpoint of the Jiva, that is accepted to be okay, transactionally real. But not absolute reality cannot be given to it. Transactionally that real. The opponent here says, the knowledge I am a man could be real. He gives a logic. It could be real. Because when we see the silver on the pearl shell, even though it is an illusion, there is no difference organized between the pearl shell and the silver. There is no difference organized. Similarly, there is no difference organized between the self and the body. So, I am a body is a real knowledge, absolutely real knowledge. Opponent contents, what is that? Logic. So, the pointer is taken from the Shruti and said it is contradicted by Shruti and reasoning. Even though illusory experience, the nacre being recognized as silver, there is non-cognition of difference between nacre and silver. In the right knowledge also, when the silver is recognized as silver, there is a non-cognition of difference between what is appearing as silver and what we are understanding as silver and silver. So, even though it is there, but this non-cognition of difference is common to illusory and as well as right knowledge, but because of that, it cannot be taken to be the absolutely real knowledge. And then continuing further, it is that in experience, there is one type of experience which is called as aparoksha. Aparoksha means immediate. It actually means that real experience. Paroksha means smriti or smarana. I am a man, etc. are actually the protection. Hence they are not smriti. When I say that particular object, then this can be remembrance and this can be from the memory. Anubhavam and smriti actually are different. The real experience, which is aparoksham and smriti, are different. And here it is said anubhavam is of two types. One is yadartha anubhavam, another one is ayadartha anubhavam. Yadartha anubhavam means as it is existing, it is being experienced. As it is existing, it is being experienced. That is called as Brahman. But ayadartha anubhavam means what? As it is existing, it is not experiencing. So, the Pratyagatma or Paramatma experiencing it as it is aparoksha anubhuti. And other kinds of experiences is not aparoksha. It can be paroksha or sometimes it can be from the relative jiva level, it is called as pratyaksha. The real Brahma or the real knowledge of the Parabrahman is anadhigata avadhitartha, meaning it cannot be refuted or negated by anything. From the Vedantic standpoint, except Brahman, everything else is negated. From the transactional standpoint, I am a man, these things may stand as a valid knowledge. I am a woman, I am a man, I am experiencing, I am doing and all that. But from the absolute standpoint, all these are negated. Meaning what? From the absolute standpoint, the so-called doer is not at all functioning. Coming back to our introductory statements, there is no doer doing things. All things are deciding themselves, doing themselves, all by themselves. So finally, what is being made to understand here, the doer from the absolute standpoint is not there. It is all God's leela. Continuing further, certain authoritative statements which make us understand that actually there is the presence of that supreme consciousness within us, and that alone is the reality. This Pratyagatma, this Pramata or the mover or the jiva or the Chidavasa, these are not actual reality. and identify with Antakarana, that is not reality. So it is said here, Yoyam Vijnanamaya Praneshu Hridyantar Jyotihi Purushaha. From the Bhagavad Upanishad it is said, the infinite entity that is identified with the intellect and is amid the organs. Who is there who is identified with the intellect and who is amid the organs? The infinite entity. That infinite is there. Meaning, as Pratyagatma, extending the power of Pratyagatma, he is there caught by the organs and caught by the internal organs. But actually, it is that extension or the power or the reflection of Pratyagatma. So the infinite is there. Why should we think that only infinite is there? The infinite is there in us. And actually through Lakshata, whatever I think as this self is Ayam Atma Brahma. Ayam Atma Brahma. Again that is referred by Madhusudana. This self is Brahman. This self is actually through Vachada it is Jiva, ordinary Jiva, transmigrant Jiva. Through Lakshata, he is Pratyagatma, who is the substratum of this Jiva, source of this Jiva. Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. From the Taittiriya Upanishad. Brahman is reality, consciousness, and infinitude. We have within us that Brahman as our seer, as the drashta, as the source of all consciousness, as the Pratyagatma, as the innermost self. It is our own nature. That itself is reality, consciousness, and infinitude. The rest all is infinitude, not conscious and unreal. Vijnanam Anandam Brahma. Vijnanam Anandam Brahma. From the Bhagavad Upanishad, Brahman is bliss, Brahman is consciousness. Brahman is consciousness and bliss. Who is that consciousness? Who is that bliss? Brahman. Why are we struggling in the world here? Because of happiness, because we want to become more knowledgeable, we want to know more, and we want to gain more, we want to become happy more. Actually, that which knows everything, that conscious principle which makes us conscious of knowing everything, which gives that capacity to know to the mind is consciousness. And that which is the source of happiness is blissful, and that is Brahman. So that is Brahman inside only. We need not struggle anywhere. We have to become merely conscious. Drop all our doings and simply become aware of the presence of Brahman, who is consciousness and bliss. Chasing things, running after things, sweating, toiling, falling up, falling down, and we are trying to know more and then gain more. Gain more knowledge, gain more happiness. But there is no need for any gain. The infinite consciousness, infinite blissfulness is there within ourselves. It is our true nature. Where are we searching? Where are we looking for this? Just to become aware of it. And some people might think, okay, what about all this sin, all the papa, all the negativity, all the pollution, all the vulgarity, all the indecency, all the impurities, what about all these things? Will these things touch that self? It is given from the Chandogya Upanishad. Ya Atma Vahata Atma. The self that is free from sin. Meaning, the self is completely free from sin. Whatever this jiva might have done, whatever this individual entity called ego might have done, whatever this transmigratory entity might have done, in crores and crores of janma, that will not touch the Atma. So, you are that Atma where you can be untouched by the sin. That you, as an individual, ignorant entity, has committed, that conscious entity is untouched by it. So, that means what? Liberation is possible. This sin will not do anything to us. Then, Yat Sakshat Aparokshat Brahma Ya Atma Sarva have to go through something else to get that. And it is not direct, it is immediate and direct. Yet Sakshat, Aparokshat is the Brahman. It is available right here, right now. And the self that is where it is, the self which is within all. The Atma Sarvantara. In everybody this Atma is there. So that which is direct and immediate, that your consciousness is in everybody. So you have to look at that. Not that one person is only sacred, other persons are not. And thereafter verse it also said, Yo Shanaya Vipase Shokam Moham Jaram Mrutyum Atyeti, that which transcends hunger, thirst, grief, delusion, decay and death. All these things are affecting the transmigratory individual. What is affecting? Thirst is there, hunger is there, grief is there, delusion is there, decay is there, death is there. None of them are there. Where? In that reality, which is well within us. So why are we holding on to this and undergoing all these things? Just to the shift of the focus of the attention of the mind onto that which is reality, which has not got all these things. We don't want nobody wants decay, nobody wants death, and every time hunger, every time thirst, every time right? Can't there be something which is freed from all this? Just leave there, go on to self. Sayatra tatra kinchit pashyati ananvagataha tena bhavati asango hyayam purusha. From the Brahman Upanishad, he is untouched by whatever he sees. Whatever he sees, he is untouched by it. For this infinite being is free from all attachment. This infinite being is free from all attachment. Whatever he sees, he is untouched by it. Here as Jiva, whatever we see, we are touched by it. Not only touched, engulfed, covered, imprisoned, entangled, chained, bound, repeatedly beaten by it. One step inside is this beautiful presence. So all these statements declare that self or the Atma is not a karta, is not a bhokta, and actually it is the supreme, blissful, conscious Brahman. One friend asked another, when he took out his handkerchief for wiping his face, what is that knot on this handkerchief? There is a knot on this handkerchief. Oh, that my wife wanted to remind me that I have to post a letter. When I take the handkerchief, there is a knot. My wife, that is only for reminding me to post the letter. Then this friend, did you post it? No. Why? My wife forgot to give the letter. So that type of forgetfulness is there in us about our own true nature. That is all it is. Our own true nature. That forgetfulness is there. We have to get out of it. Once when husband returned from office, he entered into the house. The servant maid suddenly went and stood in front of the mirror and started looking at herself. Husband, what is this servant maid? Why is she doing like that? Then he asked, why are you doing this? Oh, that is because your wife told me whenever you are at home to watch myself. We need to be cautious. Have no trust in husband. Whenever husband is at home, you will be watchful. But she thought watchful means looking into it. Meaning, whenever the worldly things enter into our mind, we should be more watchful of that Pratyagatma and then become conscious of these new entrants. That is very important. So this way, It is said in Sidhantha Bindu and as well as in Sidhantha Sindhu that we are very close, we are just there. Whatever we consider ourselves as this jiva, the pramata, the knower, thinker, doer, perceiver, feeler, whatever it is, just very, very near to us is His presence, which is untouchable. Whatever we are suffering, it is not there. That is consciousness, that is blissfulness, that is auspicious, that is reality. So, to take us there, to take us out of this superimposition, to take us there is the prime intention of Sloki, Sidhantha Bindu and Sidhantha. Om Bhagishwaraya Vidmahe Hayagrivaya Dhimahi Tanno Hayagriva Prachodayat Om Akshareshwaraya Vidmahe Mantrarajaya Dhimahi Tanno Hayagriva Prachodayat Hayagriva 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 Om Hamsasoham Vishwavatirna Rupaya Chinmayananda Rupine Tubhyam Namo Hayagriva Vidyarajaya Vishnave Swaha Hamsasoham Om Sri Halaum Om Namo Bhagavate Hayagrivaya Vishnave Mahyam Meham Prajnam Prayachasvaha Hayagriva Mangalam Hayagriva Mangalam Vishnave Mangalam Vishnave Mangalam Vidyaraja Mangalam Vidyaraja Mangalam Vishnave Mangalam Vishnave Mangalam Hayavadana Mangalam Hayavadana Mangalam Vishnave Mangalam Hayagriva Mangalam Hayagriva Mangalam Hayagriva Mangalam Hayagriva Mangalam Sarve bhavantu sukhinah Sarve santu niramayah Sarve bhadrani pashyantu Ma kaschit dukkhabhat bhavet Om Shanti 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 Hari